You've felt it before. The pull to do something that quiets your own head for an hour. A drink, the hush after a long run. Something you light and breathe in slowly. Humans don't stumble into that need by accident. Somewhere in your skull right now sit receptors waiting for a key carved long before agriculture, maybe before our species existed at all. Nobody planted that hunger on purpose. The only question is who, or what, got there first. The easy assumption is that this story starts with farming someone, somewhere in Asia, domesticating a wild plant on purpose, roughly 10,000 years ago. Is that really where the craving began, with a single planted seed? The real answer is older and stranger than that. Inside the human brain sits a compound called anandamide, named after the Sanskrit word for bliss. It binds to the exact same receptors cannabis does. That wiring was already in place before anyone ever planted anything. The oldest confirmed evidence of controlled fire comes from Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, dated to roughly 1 million years ago. The species tending that fire wasn't Homo sapiens. It was Homo erectus, smaller-brained, heavier-browed, not yet anything like us. Burning plants releases more than heat. Some release psychoactive compounds straight into the smoke. Someone, at some point lost entirely to time, breathed that in. Their brain wasn't confused by what it felt. It already had a lock built for that exact key. If finding out how deep this wiring actually goes is the kind of thing that hooks you, subscribe. This is only the first layer. Long before any of this had a name, ancient China was already writing it down. One of the world's first medical handbooks, the Pen Cao Qing, credits its catalog of cures to the legendary Emperor Shen Nong, the divine farmer. Tradition says he tested every new plant on his own body first. It's one way to build a body of medical knowledge. Not the safest one. Cannabis made the list, prescribed for joint pain and malaria, framed as something that restored balance between the body's yin and yang. Inside Taoist temples, cannabis became incense, burned in the belief that its smoke carried prayers and opened the mind to visions. Confucian scholars, suspicious of anything that loosened self-control, disapproved. Neither side won. Mystics kept burning it. Scholars kept frowning. One physician took the plant somewhere stranger still. Around 200 AD, Hua Tuo dissolved a cannabis-based powder into wine and gave it to patients before surgery. Under its effect, they reportedly felt nothing at all anesthesia, roughly 1,800 years before the West rediscovered the idea. His reputation reached the warlord Cao Cao, who suffered headaches only Hua Tuo could ease. Cao Cao wanted to keep him as a private physician. Hua Tuo wanted to go home and treat ordinary patients instead. Cao Cao read the refusal as an insult, had him imprisoned, and ordered his execution. In his final days, Hua Tuo tried to pass his medical writings to a guard. The guard, afraid of being caught holding them, refused. So Hua Tuo burned the papers himself. His formula has never been recovered. The plant didn't stay in China. It moved west along the Silk Road, carried by merchants beside silk and spice. One branch of that road cut through the Pamir Mountains of Central Asia. There, archaeologists opened 8 tombs at a site called Jirzankal, dated to around 500 BC. Inside sat 10 wooden braziers, portable heaters holding stones blackened by fire. Lab analysis caught what 25 centuries hadn't erased. It found cannabis residue on those stones, and a potent kind, far stronger than anything growing wild nearby. Someone had been selecting for strength 25 centuries before anyone had a word for it. Mourners had heated the stones, laid cannabis on top, and breathed the smoke together while burying their dead. Around the same period, the Greek historian Herodotus described the Scythians, nomads from the steppe. They pitched small tents, heated stones inside, and threw hemp seed onto them until the tent filled with smoke. Whole groups crowded in together. He wrote that they loved it. For centuries, historians treated that as travel writer exaggeration. Then, in 1947, the Soviet archaeologist Sergei Rudenko opened frozen burial mounds at Pazyryk in Siberia. sealed for over 2,000 years. Inside, tent frames, heated stones, and cannabis seeds, arranged almost exactly as Herodotus had described. Permafrost had preserved what nothing else could. Herodotus hadn't been embellishing. If anything, he'd undersold it. At a shrine in the ancient kingdom of Judah, archaeologists found 2 stone altars roughly 2,700 years old. One held frankincense, the conventional offering. The other held cannabis, mixed deliberately with animal dung to keep it smoldering slowly. In Egypt, the Ebers Papyrus, a medical text some 3,500 years old, lists cannabis among treatments for inflammation, eye disease, and menstrual pain. Egyptian priests folded it into temple incense, meant to carry prayers toward the gods. The Greek physician Dioscorides, writing in the 1st century AD, recommended cannabis for earache and joint pain in his text De Materia Medica. He also noted, with a confidence historians still find amusing, that eating too much cannabis seed could dampen sexual desire. Rome twisted hemp fiber into the ropes that held its ships together, planted from Britain to North Africa. Further north, in Sweden, Germany, and Scotland, people processed cannabis stalks for rope and baskets the same practical way. Farther east, in India, cannabis became something closer to worship. The Atharva Veda, one of Hinduism's oldest sacred texts, lists it among 5 sacred plants. The god Shiva became closely tied to bhang, a drink of cannabis leaves blended with milk. In one telling, it's the drink that calmed him after he swallowed a poison strong enough to threaten the world. People still drink it during Holi and Mahashivratri, nearly 3,000 years later. By now, the pattern is hard to miss. China, Siberia, the Caucasus, Judah, Egypt, Greece, Rome, Scandinavia, India, none of these cultures compared notes. And yet they kept arriving at the same fire, the same smoke, the same need to gather around both. So, was the plant the reason for the wanting? Or was it just the first thing clever enough to answer something that was already there, waiting? In the 1980s, the psychopharmacologist Ronald Siegel proposed something unsettling. The drive toward intoxication, he argued, functions almost like a 4th biological instinct, sitting alongside hunger, thirst, and sex. Elephants seek out fermented marula fruit. Reindeer in Siberia eat Amanita muscaria mushrooms, then drink the urine of other reindeer who ate them first. The psychoactive compounds pass through more or less intact. If the urge runs that deep across species, humans chasing the same feeling, long before anyone wrote a word down, stops looking like a choice. It starts looking like instinct, with extra steps. That reframes the whole habit. Cannabis didn't install this craving into the human brain. It found wiring that was already running, built over 1 million years of campfires, and simply gave it a name. The plant is recent. The hunger is not. The pull to disappear from one's own head for an hour was never new. It wasn't a habit invented by drug culture in the last few centuries. It was code running long before the species had language to describe it. Some of this still isn't settled. Nobody knows exactly where cannabis was first domesticated. The leading candidates are Central Asia, Northern China, and Southwest China, and the evidence pulls in different directions for each. At a site called Haimenku, in China's Yunnan province, archaeologists recovered more than 800 ancient cannabis seeds. Measuring each one revealed distinct size clusters, some suited for fiber, some for oil, some, quite possibly, for their psychoactive effect. People weren't only gathering a useful weed, they were already choosing which version of it they wanted. Even the cannabis later buried with a shaman in the deserts of western China some 25 centuries ago wasn't local. DNA testing on the preserved plant matter suggested it had been carried in from somewhere else in Asia, not grown on the spot. Jirzankal gets called the oldest confirmed site of intentional smoking, but confirmed and oldest aren't quite the same claim. Wood and dried leaf rarely survive thousands of years underground. Stone does. The real history of this habit may stretch back far further than anything that's actually been dug up. That tomb in the deserts of western China is worth returning to. Sealed for 25 centuries, it held a man in his mid-40s, pale-eyed, buried with a harp, a set of horse bridles, and nearly 2 pounds of cannabis. He never read Herodotus. He never heard of Shiva, or of Hua Tuo's lost formula. He didn't need to. By the time he was buried, people across half the ancient world had already found their way to the same fire, alone, without comparing notes. 25 centuries later, the plant in his tomb is still recognizably cannabis. The wiring in every brain that ever reached for it hasn't changed at all. If a fact like that changes how you think about your own head, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what you'd want unpacked next.